everybody, and welcome to the Shropshire Council Cabinet meeting of Wednesday the 19th of January. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and also recorded. And can I remind members to please identify your name and role before speaking so that it is clear to those watching the meeting as to who is speaking. All Cabinet members are in the room, as is Councillor David Vasma, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, and also Nick Barnsley, who's observing the meeting. We have a number of officers and councillors also joining us online. My name is Leslie Picton, I'm the leader of Shropshire Council. To my left is Tim Collard, who is the Legal and Democratic Services representative here today, and Andy Begley is to my right, who is our Chief Exec. So moving on to the agenda, do we have any apologies?
No apologies.
Thank you very much. Do we have any disclosable interests? I'm not seeing any disclosable interests. Moving on to the minutes of the 5th of Jan, I'm happy to propose those. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Potter. No comments in the room, so all those in favour of the minutes? Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 4, public questions. We have 3 questions received. Tim, would you mind reading the first question, please?
Of course, thank you. First question is from Mike Streetley. I note the details of the Council's carbon emissions provided in Table 1, Shropshire Council Carbon Emission 2020 to 21 of the recently issued Corporate Carbon Performance Monitoring Report 2021. This table does not explicitly mention carbon emissions from the Highways and Transport team, other than the line Transport Fleet, which presumably covers the whole council, not just the Highways and Transport team. Could you please explain how Highways and Transport emissions are accounted for in this table? Could you also please explain how emissions from constructing the North West Relief Road will be accounted for in the council's carbon performance monitoring?
Thank you, Tim, and the question will be answered by the portfolio holder, Councillor Ian Dellins.
Thank you very much for the question. In the first part, answer to that, the reference to transport fleet under Scope 1 in Table 1 of the Corporate Carbon Monitoring Report refers to the Council's passenger transport fleet, of which carbon performance is compiled from fuel records and mileage logs submitted, that's litres of petrol and diesel consumed. As stated in the exclusion in paragraph 4.13, this does not include data for public buses, such as Arriva, for the reported year due to lack of data. Table 1 and Table 3 of the report also include reference to highway maintenance vehicles. In this case, emissions are counted under Scope 3 and performance is calculated from mileage and fuel consumption records, together with summary carbon performance information supplied by the Council's commission service providers, WSP and CARE. Table 9, that's on page 11 of the report, summarises council emissions in the transport and highways sector at 2,000 tonnes against a sector total for Shropshire of around 730,000 tonnes. On the second part of the question, reference the emissions from constructing the North West Relief Road. As with all large capital construction projects commissioned by Shropshire Council, the carbon performance of the proposed North West Relief Road will be published as part of the documentation supporting funding or regulatory decisions to ensure that an informed decision is reached. In the case of the North West Relief Road, the planning application is accompanied by an environmental statement, which suggests that whilst the construction phase of the scheme will generate a footprint of around 48,000 tonnes of CO2 emissions, the lifetime operation of the road will generate a net positive outcome of around 21,000 tonnes of CO2 emissions, leaving a net residual lifetime footprint of around 27,000 tonnes CO2 emissions. As discussed at a meeting of full council last week, there may be plans to offset all or part of this residual footprint by investing in formally validated carbon capture and storage activities locally here in Shropshire. If this occurs, then there would be no net carbon emissions to report as part of the Council's performance monitoring, which would normally expect to capture the annual implications of capital construction or infrastructure works by the appropriate service area directorate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lenz. The second question, please, Mr. Collard.
The second question is the first from Mr. Malloy. The question is this. The government has said local authorities should not be dealing with those that avoid their tax obligation. So can I ask if you think it is morally right for someone to become a councillor voting on public expenditure if they avoid paying taxes by having a beneficial interest registered offshore in tax havens like the British Virgin Islands?
Thank you, Tim. Mr. Malloy, as your question was addressed directly to me, I presume that you are alleging that I have beneficial interests registered offshore. If you are suggesting this, I can categorically assure you I have no such holdings. If you are asking a more general question regarding this matter, then whilst I personally consider it to be important for individuals to pay whatever tax they have been legitimately assessed as owing, I note that holding monies offshore is not illegal, that tax avoidance is very different from tax evasion, and that it is for each councillor to decide if this type of holding is appropriate. Thank you. And the next question, Mr. Collard.
This is another question from Mr. Malloy, and it's a question to the portfolio holder for physical infrastructure. I would be grateful if you could answer the following question without obfuscation, as it is becoming the norm with responses from Shropshire Council. Is Shropshire Council in any way at all beneficial owner of the Food Enterprise Centre at Vanguard Way, which is registered offshore in Jersey? And does the council have any control whatsoever, directly or indirectly, over PUK GLF Nominee Limited, who are the registered owners? For the purposes of this question, beneficial ownership is an interest in the economic benefit of the property. Your beneficial ownership in property reflects your share of any gain loss from the property, including rent and profit loss on sale.
Thank you, Tim. And the question will be answered by Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you. Before I start the question, I would just say that I don't believe that at any point we as a council obfuscate in responding to any questions, whether they be public, member or tabled at meetings. In terms of the specific question that Mr. Malloy has asked, I confirm that PUK GLF Nominee A Limited and PUK GLF Nominee B Limited are the registered freehold owners of the land at the Food Enterprise Centre. The council does not have any control whatsoever, directly or indirectly, over PUK GLF Nominee A Limited or PUK GLF Nominee B Limited. In accordance with your definition, Mr. Malloy, the council does have a beneficial ownership in the Food Enterprise Centre, as it has a leasehold interest by virtue of a 125-year lease of the property granted to Shropshire County Council in October 2007 by Advantage West Midlands.
Thank you very much, Dean. So now we move on to the members' questions. We have a number of members' questions this morning, and most of the members are with us. So the first question is from Councillor Rob Wilson, who's joining us online. Rob.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rob Wilson from Copthorne. My question is, sorry, I'm on the wrong page. Changes to the Highway Code come into effect on January the 29th, 2022 to protect the most vulnerable. Research suggests that as many as 2 in 3 drivers are unaware of the changes, which include giving pedestrians right of way at side roads. Can I ask that Shropshire Council publicises these changes to the public using its social media platforms and any other means at its disposal?
Thank you, Rob. Question to be answered by Councillor Ian Nellens.
Yeah, thanks very much for that question. It is appreciated that this information hasn't been widely distributed, but Shropshire Council will include this on the website to get as much information to the local population as possible to highlight these new laws. Thank you.
Can I just ask in addition, is the council currently considering using implied zebra crossings to encourage compliance with the new rules at side roads? These are currently being trialled in Greater Manchester and could be an extremely cost-effective intervention.
At present, there's no plan for that. However, it can be considered, and I will raise it with officers and get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. The second question is also from Rob. and it's for Councillor Dean Carroll. So Rob, your second question, please.
Thank you very much. The Transport Decarbonisation Plan, published in July of last year, sets out how the UK transport network will move to net zero by 2050. In terms of road transport, while some of this can be achieved by a shift to electric and hydrogen vehicles, there will still need to be a reduction of traffic levels. The traffic modelling for North West Road is based on an assumption of 25% traffic growth by 2038. Will this discrepancy be taken account of in the full business case, and when can we expect the full business case?
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Carroll, you can answer the question, please.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, for the question. The traffic modelling approach undertaken by the North West Relief Road to date, an outline business case and for planning application stage, and the assumptions and trends upon which this is based are prescribed fully by the Department for Transport. A project is required to work within these set criteria in order to meet the Department for Transport's own oversight and approvals process to gain funding. Local observations and traffic counts are used to establish baseline years, but model and forecast future outputs, and the formulas used to determine these are not able to be locally defined. Work on the preparation of the full business case for the North West Relief Road is underway at present, and will continue to reflect the requirements of the Department for Transport's National Modelling Framework for Traffic Growth. Should this be changed by Department for Transport in order to reflect changing national targets and priorities, the North West Relief Road will, of course, then also reflect this. The full business case is expected to be completed for member review prior to its submission to the Department for Transport by winter 2022. Thus, the process of working through the Department for Transport is required. However, the anticipated outcome is the completion of the North West Relief Road would enable traffic reduction and therefore additional capacity to support public transport, active travel and public realm measures in Shrewsbury Town Centre, and support the intended movement strategy and general direction for travel for the town and wider areas.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Wilson, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you for that. I'd just like to know what capital projects does the council have in progress at the moment, specifically aimed at traffic reduction?
Councillor Carroll?
I'm sure we can provide Councillor Wilson with a full and comprehensive list of projects from the large to the very small in writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on. The next question comes from Councillor Ruth Houghton. Ruth, joining us online. Over to you.
Thank you. Ruth Houghton, Bishop's Castle. The budget consultation questionnaire is available on the Shropshire Council website and is a formal 6-week public consultation on budget proposals, which, if implemented, will impact on individuals and communities across Shropshire. Until very recently, the survey questions included acronyms and text that was very council specific and not easily understood by members of the public. I'm grateful to the Chief Executive for ensuring that changes have been made to correct this. However, this consultation questionnaire is still difficult to complete. For example, how does a member of the public respond to the savings identified against the review of library provision when the library strategy is only being reported upon at this cabinet meeting? Or alternatively, against the review of leisure services? Where can the public access the leisure services review in order to form an opinion? Are there any publicly available links to any of these? Having considered this, will the portfolio holder confirm how this consultation complies with the gunning principles adopted by the Local Government Association? Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth, and over to Councillor Gwilym Butler to respond.
Good morning, Ruth. Thank you for your question. Thank you for your feedback regarding the public consultation on budget proposals. We are attempting to make the issue accessible and not overly complex and detailed, and have relied on feedback from previous year's consultation. The examples you cite in relation to the libraries and leisure services are both part of existing strategies. For example, the £191,930 saved library saving mentioned in the consultation is part of the 5-year savings plan that was put in place in 2018-19, which comes to an end in 22-23. If implemented, the saving would fall across the entire library service and will be considered as part of the ongoing library transformation programme. The more detailed explanation of the examples highlighted in the question, along with publicly available links, are attached to the written version of this answer. I'm happy to take on board this and the other feedback for future consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwilym. Ruth, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, if I may, Chair. Just really how, in particular, at point 2 of the gunning principles around that there being sufficient information available to give intelligent consultation and consideration, so that the information provided is available at the time of the consultation to the members of the public. And I don't think that's unreasonable. So how will the council ensure that that is available in the future?
Gwilym?
Thank you, Ruth. I take on board your question. My feeling would be that as these strategies are actually historic and the savings were identified in 2018-19, the principles were covered at that stage. However, I think you raise a relevant point, and I'd be more than happy if Performance Management Scrutiny take up that question and have a look at it when the officers are available to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwilym. I think it's fair to say, Ruth, that it's one of those things. It's about trying to get people to be able to understand the consultation without swamping them with detail. But I do take your points on board. We will look at that going forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Moving on. Sorry, I'll just turn my mic off. Moving on to the next question. It comes from Councillor David Vasmer, who is in the room.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to ask, what is the council's plan regarding the reopening of Acton Scott Historic Working Farm?
Thank you, Councillor Vasmer. Councillor Cecilia Motley to respond.
Thank you, David, for that question. Acton Scott Historic Working Farm is closed, as it usually always is, until Easter. It doesn't operate during the winter months. And currently we're working with the Acton Scott Estate to help identify alternative operating models. Community and stakeholder engagement will begin on the 24th of January with a view to understanding the views of different stakeholders about the farm, options for viable alternative uses of Acton Scott Historic Working Farm, options for alternative organisations who are interested in operating the site, visitors' perceptions of the farm and the services it offers. These perceptions will inform the future operation of the site. The farm the lease on the farm was originally signed in the 1970s. Over recent years, it's traded with a substantial deficit, and with the current financial challenges, Shropshire Council is no longer in a position to sustain this. So a report summarising the findings from this engagement will be shared with the Acton Scott Estate, with whom we're working very closely on this, and recommendations regarding the Council's involvement are planned to be presented to Cabinet for a final decision in April 22.
Thank you, Councillor Motley. Do you have a supplementary, David?
Yes, thanks very much. Yes, obviously I'm very welcome the discussions that are taking place. There's a lot of concern within the local community. But will you be actually kind of revealing all the financial implications and open the books to the campaigners who are trying to secure the future of Acton Scott?
There is an information pack which is being put together at the moment for distribution to interested parties in this. Yes.
It will be a completely open book process, Councillor Vasmer. All that information is being made available. So thank you for that. Okay, so moving on now to the next item on the agenda, which is reports from scrutiny. Councillor Claire Wild is joining us virtually.
Thank you very much. My name is Claire Wild. I'm the councillor for the Severn Valley, and I'm also chair of Performance Management Scrutiny. At yesterday's scrutiny, we discussed civil enforcement, and what we're asking Cabinet is to look into ways of increasing the powers of civil enforcement, environmental teams and street scene, so that fixed penalties for fly tipping, dog fouling, antisocial behaviour, etc. can be issued. And because we realise it's quite a big task, we'd like you to come back within 6 months. If I can just explain a bit further. So, for instance, in other authorities, people like the traffic wardens and the people who go around doing environmental maintenance actually have the powers to actually fine people. So if you're walking along the street between ticketing cars and you see somebody drop litter or you see somebody's dog fouling, you can actually just issue a notice. Now, clearly, it would give us many more feet on the ground. Presently, we only have actually 1.5 dog wardens for the whole of Shropshire. So that just puts it into a bit of perspective. So I just think we need to be, as a council, a bit smarter in the way we use our resources and actually make what we've got go a lot further. And by doing this, I think we would really make inroads into the things that bother us the most. But I'm happy to take any questions off anybody. And if there are any other members who are asking questions, I'm happy to answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wild. So that's going to be split across a number of portfolios by the sound of it. So I think that's going to involve certainly Ian, certainly Dean. I think there's a bit of licensing in there, Ed, so that's probably you as well. So we will get together on this, Councillor Wild, and we will come back to you within the 6 months as you ask. I don't disagree that I know other authorities do it. Telford, I understand, started doing it a couple of years ago. Is that your finalising? I can see Julian's got his hand up. Claire, is that finalising your report?
Sorry, yes, I'm just concerned in case Julian wants to ask a question. He was at scrutiny yesterday.
Yeah, that's fine. Councillor Julian Dean.
Thank you very much. It's tangentially related to that. There was news in the autumn about councils getting additional powers around fining for moving traffic offences. I just wanted to throw that into the mix and know whether those powers actually did come through, and you know that would also be something that we would need to look at if we're going to be serious about enforcement. Thank you.
I've looked to my left and right, Councillor Dean, and we're not sure about that, so we will come back to you, but I'm sure it can be put into the mix anyway. So thank you for that. No other questions? Okay, so moving on to the main items on the agenda. Item number 7, Council Debt Collection Policy Review. Councillor Graham Butler.
Thank you, Leader. It is good housekeeping that we regularly publicise how we collect debt that is or monies owed to the council, and I'm sure all my fellow members will realise that we need to get our collection rates up as high as possible in these times where we are in financial constraints. And I also want to ensure that any debt collection is done in an equitable way and a fair way. So I'm really pleased that this report has come forward, and I just moved the recommendations 3.1 to 3.3, noting that the debt in relation to adults and children's social care debt and parking debt will be coming to one merged policy, hopefully later in this year. I move the recommendations 3.1 to 3.3. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Graham, do I have a seconder to that?
Yeah, Councillor Rob Gittins, and yes, I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Rob. Julian, is that a legacy hand? Okay. Oh, David Vasmer in the room.
Thanks, Chair. I just welcome this report, but there's an item which concerns me really, or issues I'd like to raise. Firstly, on the if you look at in the report at 4.3, it says there are a range of communication channels going to be used, including councillors, which I welcome, in order to inform people about this policy. I'd be interested to see which channels we're talking about. In 8.2, it says it identifies partnership with other organisations and refers to Appendix A 3.4. If you go to Appendix A 3.4, you'll see it's a reference to private companies. The use of private companies, I think, and I worry that there are provisions in this report to protect people who are in debt, to make sure the council acts properly. But my worry is that if these powers are farmed out to private companies, that they won't be so careful. And I do worry about that. I would like some, maybe I've got this wrong, but I'd like some feedback on that.
Thank you, David. Julia, is your question related?
Yes.
Yeah, ask yours first.
I've had correspondence from residents who were pursued by a very aggressive debt collector agency on behalf of the council for a very small parking fine, and they were a very vulnerable family, and they've now submitted a formal complaint. And it seems that I would suggest that the standards of the agencies, the third parties that we are employing, need to be scrutinised much more closely.
Thank you, Julia. Councillor Gwilym Butler.
Thank you. Thank you, David and Julia, for what you've actually just said. I do agree. It's interesting because I actually had a conversation with Phil Weir, who oversees a lot of this, and James, and I actually asked them, you know, what is the majority of the deaths? And I do understand, and like I said in my preamble, that we have to do it in a fair and equitable way. But I am led to believe there's an awful lot of people out there who've got the money and the assets but just refuse to pay. And if they actually paid when they were asked to pay, it would save the taxpayer an awful lot of time and money. So I agree with you, it is getting that balance. What I suggest is, David, into the specifics, we'll get back to you in writing regarding the companies we are dealing with, and perhaps I'll undertake to find out how many complaints we've had in relation to the number of people we're actually dealing with, if that helps, Julia. I obviously don't want to go into specifics today, but if you have any problems, please come back to me and I'll chase them up for you. Thank you.
Can I just come back quickly, Sharon? Thanks very much. Thanks for that response, Gwilym. I just would like to, and why can't we actually apply the kind of regulations and the processes which we abide by to private companies when those contracts are entered into?
Just for clarification, the companies are not farmed out. They work in partnership with enforcement agents very carefully. So our officers are actually working with those agents very carefully, and it would obviously take into account the complaints procedures as well. The main message to people to get out there, if you have any debt outstanding with Shropshire Council, the worst thing to do is to ignore it. The best thing to do is pick up the phone or email us and we will help you sort it out. Yeah, the payment plans or whatever, but don't ignore it. It will not go away. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwilym. I don't have any other questions in the room or online, so we have a proposal and a second. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That one is passed. Moving on to item number 8, Shropshire Schools Funding Formula 2022-23. Councillor Kirsty Hurst-Knight.
Thank you, Leader. So it's regarding Shropshire Schools Funding Formula for 22-23. The report is seeking formal approval of the Shropshire Schools Funding Formula. It's a requirement of the Department for Education. Cabinet can be assured that the detail within the report, though very technical, has been considered and agreed by the Shropshire Schools Forum at their meeting on the 2nd of December last year. The government settlement for school funding for 22-23 is in general terms welcomed. However, this is not to underplay the pressures that a number of Shropshire schools are facing in the coming financial and academic year from higher inflation, increased fuel costs, pay awards and other costs of living pressures. I'm therefore pleased to be able to advise that the Shropshire Schools block allocation for next year is sufficient to fully fund the local formula in line with the national funding formula, which is good news for all our schools and academies. The government settlement also allows for the transfer of 0.5% of the schools block, a sum of £949,000 into the high needs block to meet and address the significant pressures of this block through the provision of specialist educational services for most vulnerable and providers. The allocation of funding for the high needs block has struggled to match the cost of demand for a number of years, so this transfer of funds is essential in assuring that these specialist services and support to our specialist providers is now fully funded. So just to summarise, it's a requirement of the Department of Education. Really pleased to note that it was discussed, considered at length at Schools Forum recently, and that we have a significant fund going into the high need block where our educational partners feel is best placed. So I'm therefore looking for Cabinet to approve the recommendation from this report regarding the funding formula for Shropshire Schools for 22-23 as detailed. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty. Do I have a seconder for that report?
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Gwilym Butler, Portfolio Holder for Resources and Finance. Happy to second and reserve my right.
Thank you, Gwilym. I've got a hand up from Councillor David Basman.
Thanks, Leader. I think I'm just referring to this item. I've got an issue with ventilation in schools. A lot of schools have not received ventilation units, and the result of which they're keeping the windows open, and there's been a massive increase in their energy costs. And I was hoping that the authority might be able to look at this particular issue, because I think particularly for small schools, along with the increases that result from the school meal the shower services changes, there could be real problems for small schools, and therefore I'd like the portfolio maybe to give me a response on that, and to see whether we can't actually deal with the issue of ventilation and make sure that the extra energy costs which have resulted from schools having to keep windows open, and also the increase in costs of the energy units are dealt with.
Thank you, Councillor Bosworth. Councillor Kirsty-Husnite.
Thank you for your question, David. Yeah, I can send over some information for you regarding the ventilation units. I believe they have been ordered, and there's discussions with local schools, and including costs of keeping schools warm, with also keeping in guidance with the COVID regulations of keeping the windows open. So I'll get that information over to you. But yes, discussions and ventilation units are on order. Thank you.
We'll make sure you get that information. We'll send it out to everybody in attendance today. So I see no other hands.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Motley.
Sorry, I just wanted to comment actually that there was a very interesting piece in one of the papers on Sunday, written by apparently an eminent scientist, who pointed out that actually schools don't need to throw their windows wide open, that they get the same result in dispersing potential COVID germs if they open the window just a couple of inches. I don't know whether that would have any effect on the heating bills, but it might just be worth experimenting with.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Motley. I know the schools are constantly looking at ways of trying to resolve this issue. And as Kirsty said, I mean, unfortunately, one of the issues we've got at the moment is that the ventilation units, and this is happening across the country, are stuck somewhere in Europe, I understand. But anyway, hopefully we'll get those as soon as possible. I'm also, I think I'm right in saying that not all of the schools require ventilation units, because a lot of them, certainly some of the newer ones, have got adequate ventilation already. Anyway, I have a proposer and I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. So moving on, we now go to, sorry, I've just lost my screen. We now go on to the eloquently titled Pets as Prizes report, which is Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you, Leader, and you'll be pleased to know that this isn't proposing to give councillors Labradors or Great Danes as a prize for turning up a cabinet, if you're not already a member. No, this, well, in all seriousness, this came to our attention last year when a number of residents contacted local councillors, myself included, to raise the awareness of the RSPCA's campaign to abolish the practice of giving pets as prizes. I think most people would be familiar from childhood with the practice, particularly at fairgrounds, of goldfish in plastic bags full of water being handed out to often quite bemused or confused children for prizes at various stores. What we know now is that that practice is extremely harmful and distressing to the animals. They're often received by families who had no intention that morning of going home with a pet, have none of the equipment or knowledge necessary for taking care of that pet, and in fact quite often those pets don't even make it home. Those goldfish don't even make it home due to the psychological trauma, the lack of oxygen, of being kept in a sealed plastic bag with water, or sudden change in temperature from being hung outside in the direct sunlight and then being put in a car with air conditioning for a long drive home. There's also the other unfortunate impact that some some people on acquiring these prizes with no intention of keeping them, release them into the wild with goldfish that could be into a watercourse or even flushed down the toilet, sadly. And with small mammals that can just be released into a field. But actually this has dire and unforeseen effects, biodiversity effects on the ecosystems that they're released into, in which they are not part of the native species, not part of the native environment. So we asked officers to come back with a proposal modelled on the RSPCA's ask, and you can see the recommendations 3.1 to 3.4 in the report, that in the first instance we will immediately ban the giving of live animals as prizes in any council-owned property through adapting and changing our licensing and lease agreements. We will also be petitioning the council to request, sorry, we would also be petitioning the government to request an outright ban of giving live animals as prizes on all land within the UK. I understand that similar policies are already in place in Scotland and other devolved parts of the UK. So what we are doing is seeking to move Shropshire as far as we can at this stage into line with those areas, and requesting the UK government to apply that as a national standard. So I will move recommendations 3.1 to 3.4 in the report, and I'll happily take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Do I have a seconder for that report?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Motley. I'm not seeing any questions online or in the room. I have to say, Councillor Carroll, that I was contacted by a number of residents actually who will be really pleased that this is happening. I was talking to somebody from the from Severn Trent a while ago who said the number of goldfishes in our watercourses has increased dramatically in the last 15 years. I'm not saying it's simply from the fairs and stuff, but you know, it's not the best place for it. So I've got no questions in the room, so I have a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour? Brilliant, we'll bring that in now. Thank you very much indeed. My apologies for the next item. I should have announced at the beginning of the meeting that Shropshire Library Strategy is not coming to this meeting. It's going to be coming to a meeting possibly in February, more likely in March. So that's been deferred. Item number 11 is the regulation of investigatory powers, policy and guidance. Councillor Rob Gittins.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader. Fundamentally, the RIPA policy is about implementing appropriate checks and balances to ensure any surveillance activity undertaken by council officers is compatible with the human right to privacy. At the same time, the policy demonstrates that the council accepts that surveillance is a necessary enforcement tool that is required to effectively deliver the council's statutory and public duties that are aimed at protecting local communities from the adverse impact of crime and disorder, as well as inappropriate or fraudulent conduct within the council itself. The approval and adoption of the revised policy and guidance will address the specific recommendation by the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office of the council's existing policy and guidance being reviewed and updated, and provide the basis upon which officers will undertake lawful surveillance activities. Governance and oversight arrangements are in place. Internally, surveillance activities will continue to be reported to the Audit Committee, and where there are concerns, depending on the seriousness, escalated as necessary to Cabinet or even full Council. For court RIPA surveillance, the Magistrates Court, the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office and the Investigatory Powers Tribunal provide external approval and oversight. And if I could ask Cabinet to approve the recommendations as laid out in the Cabinet paper 3.1. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Do I have a seconder for that?
Councillor Kirsty Thurston-White, happy to second.
Thank you, Kirsty. Do I have any questions on that report? I mean, it's a very, very detailed report. Councillor David Rasmer.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, it's a very detailed report. Thanks very much for it, and I very welcome it. I just wanted to raise one issue right at the end of the report. I think it's item 59. It refers to complaints, and if we are trying to make sure that people who maybe have this be surveyed or have their rights guaranteed and be able to make complaints, I just think that shouldn't there be an acknowledgement that there should be a time period in which we acknowledge a complaint, a time period in which we deal with the complaint, and also is there a process whereby reference to the IPT is actually after the complaint to the authority or at the same time. I just think that this is to be welcomed, but I think that people who have a genuine concern should have more guidance on the way in which their complaint and give timers in post about how their complaint is dealt with.
Thank you, Councillor Rasmer. Councillor Gittins.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Nelson, for your question. I think from the first part of your question's point of view, I'd be happy to sort of send that over to the auditor committee to take a look at the procedures there. In regards to your second part of the question, if I could probably just bring in the officer, Francis Darling, who I'm sure is joining us on the call today, who could probably just go through those bits and pieces in regards to the IPT. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gittins. I think Francis was joining us. Is that right, Tanya? Yes, she is. I can see her now. Welcome, Francis. Perhaps did you hear David's question?
Yes, I did. Good morning, everybody. So 2 points really. The complaints process itself for the council is obviously set out in the council's corporate complaints process, and then the process there is no different if they want to come in through that. As far as the IPT is concerned, there's not a laid down process, and I think going back to Councillor Gittins' comment, we can take that away and clarify that through, I mean, I can add it on to the actual policy document itself, but I suspect because the tribunal covers all sorts of public bodies and particularly the police, which is very much what RIPA is around, it could be that there are different things for different parts of public services, but I can clarify that and add that in as necessary.
Thank you very much, Francis. Yeah, David's nodding. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I see no other hands or see no other questions. All those proposer and seconder I have. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to the item number 12, future Oswestry plan consultation. Councillor Ed Potter.
Thank you very much, Leader. Members will see in the agenda. This is around going out to consultation on the future Oswestry master plan. So the report being presented to Cabinet outlines the work to date led by the Future Oswestry Group in bringing forward this master plan. The intention is that the master plan is to be flexible, long-term call to action, not determining specific projects or initiatives, but rather flagging a range of potential projects and opportunities referred to as big ideas in which future discussions should be had and local collaborative decisions be made. The vision will be used to guide future development and investment decisions in the Oswestry area. This work has come about through the Future Oswestry Group, which is a collaboration with local partners such as the Oswestry Town Council and the Oswestry Business Improvement District. The purpose of the consultation will focus on a mix of face-to-face exhibitions subject to COVID-19 guidance, online workshops, online meetings and questionnaires alongside Shropshire Council's consultation portal within our website. 2 community representatives have been appointed to provide advice and support to the future Oswestry partners to shape the shared vision and to help develop appropriate mechanisms for communicating with key stakeholders, establishing networks and the wider community. This is a really positive move for Oswestry, and very much hope that Cabinet will back going out to consultation on this and we can start to bring forward some good positive ideas to increase economic growth and development in Oswestry, a key market town within North Shropshire. That also has significant importance around our tourist economy, and this is part of a sequence of projects we have underway. We've talked about Shrewsbury in the past, Oswestry now, and we will also be bringing forward the Future Bridge North programme in the very near future to really champion and drive forward external investment, as well as us helping to shape the market towns across the county. Recommendations are laid out at points 3, 1 and 3.2 in the report, and I hope Cabinet will approve this paper.
Thank you very much, Ed. Do I have a seconder for that, please?
Yeah. Councillor Simon Jones, I'm happy to second the recommendation and reserve my right.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Dean, you have your hand up. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Just a little bit concerned about the effectiveness of jointly working with Oswestry Town Council. I noticed that they on Monday voted to oppose the proposed demolition of the Morrison's site, saying that there's no business plan attached to it, and actually it could be a useful building even within an Oswestry plan, from the point of view of reducing any embedded carbon in terms of changes that are made. So I'm just concerned that we're ploughing ahead with proposals to make changes in Oswestry, such as bringing down that building, even before this consultation has come forward.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Potter.
Thank you very much. I've this morning, along with Councillor Dean Carroll, portfolio holder for assets, have been will be having conversations with Oswestry Town Council following communications from them. In relation to the Morrison site, this is not predetermining the site's future use in any way. As with any development, we are simply putting in place processes to enable all options to be considered in the final plan. This is a process we want to move forward as quickly as possible, so we want to establish whether this would be an option available for the Morrison site, should that be something that comes out of the master plan vision. It gives us the ability to consider temporary and meanwhile uses on the site, alongside considering long-term development options, and as I've said, any proposals that might come forward through the master plan vision.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Basma.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to welcome this report and welcome the consultation that's been undertaken. It's much needed in Oswestry. There's a need for real investment in the town, and I think that I hope that this will be the beginning of a new phase for Oswestry. Just a couple of points really. I agree with Councillor Dean and concerned about Morrison's and about the demolition of the old store, and hope that something can be resolved on that. Secondly, I do worry, given my experience in Shrewsbury, that the council does take recognition and implements the results of the consultation. I think on some issues in Shrewsbury, we've seen that council haven't always agreed with what's come forward from the consultation. I hope in this case they will do so. And the last thing I would say, just a personal thing really, but I do find the Mile End development at the moment quite extraordinary. There's an awful lot of tarmac there, and I'm hoping that the final view of Mile End will be kind of much greener and much more welcoming, because it does seem there's an awful lot of road infrastructure being put in, and it seems a shame also that the pedestrian bridge there is not going to be LTM 120 compliant. But apart from those small points, I very much welcome this development and hope it leads to a new deal for Oswestry.
Thank you, Councillor Basma. Councillor Potter, do you want to come back on that one?
Well, yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Basma, for your support for this. I very much hope you'll take part in the consultation moving forward. Just touching on Mile End, I mean, a significant amount of improvement work has been done there. It's delivering on time and on budget, and of course it will bring forward the Oswestry Innovation Park, which is opening up much needed service plots for businesses in the Oswald Street area to grow, as well as attracting hopefully many more businesses into the area, which will be of a huge benefit. And of course, the not insignificant infrastructure projects of the bridge will enable walking onto that site. And of course, that is not an insignificant cost in building such a large infrastructure piece to enable access into the Oswald Street Innovation Park and linking it with the wider Oswald Street town area moving forward. And of course, as things develop, I'm sure we'll see a lot more green and a little less tarmac, but tarmac is very much something that goes along with roads.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Dean, is that a comeback or is that a legacy?
Yeah, no, I wanted to just respond again to Councillor Potter. It's good to hear that there's discussions going on with the town council. I don't get that you're looking at meantime uses for a site, but you're taking the building down. I mean, it just doesn't sound a very sensible approach when that building, you know, according to the town council, is quite usable, exactly for meantime approaches. And in terms of, you know, that if there's no replacement plan, then the result is that all the materials will be wasted, and that's a waste of materials, and it's a huge carbon footprint which could have been avoided. And meantime uses, I'm sure, could come forward for the building. So I'm a bit concerned about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. I think Councillor Potter is going to come back to you, followed by Councillor Dean.
Yeah, I'm sure Councillor Dean Carroll, portfolio holder for assets, will fill in a little bit more detail on this. I just wanted to say that the site has been vacant for 2 years now and has been advertised for rent for a significant time period as well. So, I mean, it's all about us exploring the options, and a planning application has gone in doesn't mean at this stage what that outcome will be. We can't predetermine what the planning process will be. I'm sure Councillor Carroll will enlighten us further.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, referring back to what Councillor Potter just said, the significant period of time that it's been marketed for, both under our ownership and previously under Morrison's ownership, extends to 5 years, in which time there's been no concrete interest in it. I think what's important to remember is that retail needs have changed significantly, which is why many large retailers are seeking to dispose of their older sites in favour of newer sites. They're generally quite energy inefficient to run. Their floor layouts aren't space effective, meaning that they end up paying higher business rates than they believe that they need to for the amount of space they actually use. So I think we need to recognise that just because we have a building there that was purpose built for that purpose 30, 40 years ago doesn't mean that it actually is attractive to anybody now. And I think the 5 years that it's been marketed for without significant interest is testament to the fact that it simply does not meet what modern retailers need from a premises of that size.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Okay, see no other hands, no other questions. I have a proposal and a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. So we now move on to item number 13, which is exclusion of the press and public. I do apologise, Ms Gallagher, but you will need to leave us. At least you can get out the door this time. I'll close it, Thank you, Joan. We'll just make sure this other door is closed as